so many things to offer beyond my race, my body, my gender, my age.
All the people on stage and all the people in the audience overcome such boring questions, really.
Boring questions?
Pretty boring in the end, yeah.
She's been called a queen on screen, a rebel off it, and one of the few stars who never played by Hollywood's rules. Helen Mirren might look like the picture of elegance, but behind that calm smile is a story of aristocratic secrets, defiance, painful confessions, and choices that shocked everyone around her. From her Russian noble roots to the moments she revealed her darkest memories, from the love story that could have changed her life to the shocking truth about why she never wanted children. Helen's real journey is far more dangerous, daring, and fascinating than the headlines ever told us. Helen Mirren's story begins in a world of contradictions, and that contrast shaped everything about the woman she would become. Born Ilyana Lydia Mironov on July 26, 1945, in Hammersmith, London, Helen arrived into a family torn between two very different identities. Her mother, Kathleen, was a working-class East Ender who knew the value of survival during wartime Britain. Her father, Basil Mironov, came from Russian nobility, descended from aristocrats who had once lived in privilege before revolution and exile forced their family into a much harsher life. The Mironovs had history with Queen Victoria's household in the 1800s, but by the time Helen was born, there was nothing royal about their existence. They lived modestly, her father driving a cab and playing the viola in an orchestra just to keep food on the table. During the Blitz, he served as an ambulance driver in the dangerous streets of London, risking his life while bombs fell around the city. After the war, he took a job with the Ministry of Transport as a civil servant, steady work that allowed the family to survive but never flourish. By 1951, the family faced another reality. They needed to hide their Russian heritage in order to avoid suspicion in a Britain still wary of Soviet ties. So they changed their name to Mirren. What was once Mironov, with echoes of aristocratic grandeur, was streamlined into something safer, something more English. This moment mattered. It wasn't just a name change, it was an identity shift that taught young Helen that survival often meant reinvention. She grew up knowing both the pride of noble ancestry and the sting of working-class struggle. That duality, the feeling of belonging to two worlds while never fully fitting into either, would give her the edge that later made her impossible to ignore on stage and screen. Helen didn't grow up in isolation. In fact, she was surrounded by family members who were living lives as glamorous and unusual as her own. One of them was her cousin, Tanya Mallet, who would later become famous as a Bond girl in Goldfinger. While most kids in post-war Britain were scraping by and dreaming of stability, Helen's circle already brushed against the glitz of the movie world. But what's interesting is that Helen never craved to follow the same path of modeling or glossy Hollywood beauty. She admired Tanya, but she also kept a distance from that kind of fame. Instead, she began shaping her identity around something far more rebellious. She was raised with pride in her family's Russian roots, but unlike many of her relatives who still respected royal traditions, Helen openly admitted she was an anti-monarchist. Imagine that, a young girl with aristocrats in her bloodline rejecting the very idea of monarchy. That defiance wasn't just a phase, it was a mindset that stuck with her throughout her entire life. Her cousin's world revolved around appearances, but Helen's instincts pushed her in the opposite direction. She wanted to be known for her voice, her intensity, her choices, things no camera could fully capture in a single photograph. That difference created a subtle tension within her family. On one side, there was elegance, fashion, and tradition. On the other hand, Helen, stubborn and opinionated, already questioning why society worshipped crowns and beauty over substance. Growing up in Leigh-on-Sea, Essex, she and Tanya spent a lot of time together. But Helen was already carving a path that would challenge both Hollywood and the British establishment. By the time Helen reached her late teens, her future was already diverging from the predictable paths that surrounded her. While other young women in Essex looked toward steady jobs, marriage, and family, Helen had her sights set on something larger, something riskier. She joined the National Youth Theatre, and from the very beginning, it was clear she wasn't going to fade into the background. Her performances carried a raw energy that made audiences uncomfortable, captivated, and unable to look away. It wasn't long before she was invited into the Royal Shakespeare Company, a place that didn't just build careers, it created legends. The timing couldn't have been better. The late 1960s and early 1970s were a period when theater was breaking rules, and Helen was the perfect storm of talent and rebellion. She quickly became known for roles that pushed boundaries. At just 22, she was cast as Cleopatra, and critics described her as magnetic, sensual, and dangerous all at once. Soon after, she appeared in a television documentary aptly titled "Doing Her Own Thing." The title alone captured her spirit. She wasn't there to play it safe. Over the next decade, Helen built a reputation as fearless. She tackled Lady Macbeth in 1974, a role that demanded intensity and precision, and she delivered both. But it was her 1983 performance in The Roaring Girl as Moll Cutpurse that cemented her reputation. Critics said she brought a singularity of purpose to the role, filling the stage with an energy so sharp it felt dangerous. Even when she wasn't in a scene, her absence was noticed. Helen Mirren's fearlessness didn't stop at the theater doors. It carried into her personal life, where her choices were just as bold and unconventional. In 1981, while working on the fantasy epic Excalibur, she crossed paths with a then-unknown Irish actor named Liam Neeson. At the time, Neeson was still climbing out of obscurity, hoping to make a name for himself. Helen, already established as a formidable talent, saw something in him that others had yet to notice. Their chemistry on set was instant, and what began as a professional collaboration quickly turned into a passionate romance. For several years they lived together, and by Neeson's own admission, Helen had an enormous influence on his career. She pushed him to get a professional agent, telling him he was too talented to keep waiting for opportunities that might never come. Without her insistence, it's possible Neeson may never have broken into the Hollywood A-list the way he eventually did. Their relationship was intense, filled with admiration and affection, but it was also clear that Helen wasn't the kind of woman to settle simply because people expected her to. As Neeson's career began to take off, so did Helen's, and the demands of their work strained their time together. Eventually, the two went their separate ways, not because of scandal or betrayal, but because life was pulling them in different directions. And yet, the love between them never truly vanished. Decades later, when asked about Helen, Neeson spoke of her with warmth and respect, acknowledging the crucial role she played in shaping his early career. Helen herself once admitted in an interview that she would love Liam until the day I die. For all her rebellious choices, Helen Mirren did eventually find a love story that lasted. In 1986, while working on the set of the film White Nights, she met American director Taylor Hackford. Unlike many of her past romances, this one grew slowly, built not on whirlwind passion, but on trust, companionship, and shared respect for each other's work. The two began dating, and after more than a decade together, they finally married on New Year's Eve in 1997 in a quiet ceremony in Scotland. For Hackford, it was his third marriage, but for Helen, it was her first and only. She was in her early 50s when she tied the knot, a decision that once again proved she never let society dictate her timeline. But what stunned many fans and critics alike wasn't the marriage. It was her openness about one choice she never wavered on. Helen has repeatedly said she never wanted children, and unlike other celebrities who offered excuses or deflected questions, she was brutally honest about it. She didn't dislike kids, but she simply never felt the maternal urge that so many assumed came naturally to women. For decades, this was seen as controversial, almost rebellious, especially during the 1980s and 1990s when women in Hollywood were expected to have it all: the career, the marriage, and the children. Helen defied that script completely. Even after marrying Hackford, she stood by her decision, despite the fact that he already had 2 children from previous marriages. For Helen, it wasn't a compromise or a sacrifice, it was a declaration of independence. She wasn't afraid of being judged, because she knew her happiness wasn't defined by motherhood. That stance resonated with some and shocked others. In interviews, she acknowledged the backlash, but stood firm, saying it was simply not who she was. Over time, her honesty helped dismantle a stereotype that women, especially in the spotlight, had to follow the same path in order to be complete. Helen Mirren's defiance of tradition didn't stop with love or motherhood. It reached into something even more personal: her beliefs. In 2007, she released her autobiography, In the Frame: My Life in Words and Pictures, a book filled with snapshots of her career and candid reflections on her private life. It gave fans a closer look at her journey, but what really shocked people came later. In a 2011 interview with Esquire, Helen didn't hold back when the topic of religion came up. Instead of offering a safe or diplomatic answer, she said outright that she didn't believe in God. Not only that, she joked that she put more faith in fairies and leprechauns than in any kind of divine figure. At the time, her honesty was rare. Many stars avoided discussing faith altogether, knowing it could alienate fans. But Helen didn't care about playing it safe. Her words weren't meant to mock, but to underline who she was, a woman guided by curiosity, independence, and her own moral compass rather than doctrine. She didn't reject spirituality completely. She often spoke of believing in human kindness, in energy, and in the mysteries of life. But she refused to align herself with organized religion. To her, the very idea of needing to follow rigid rules for salvation never made sense. This was more than a quirky comment. It was a statement of freedom, just like her decisions in her personal life. Helen's rejection of faith wasn't about rebellion for the sake of being controversial. It was about honesty. She lived her life exactly as she felt it, without fear of judgment. And for many fans, that made her even more relatable. Here was a woman at the top of her craft, celebrated around the world, openly saying what millions quietly felt but were too afraid to admit. By the late 2000s, Helen Mirren had already built a reputation as fearless, but nothing prepared fans for what she admitted in a candid 2008 interview with GQ. For the first time, she spoke publicly about one of the darkest chapters of her youth. She revealed that she had been assaulted more than once during her student years. It was a shocking confession, not just because of the trauma itself, but because Helen had always carried herself with such unshakable confidence. To hear her describe moments when she felt powerless stunned audiences. She admitted that part of the reason she was vulnerable in those years was the culture of the 1960s, wild parties, heavy drinking, and experimentation with drugs that often blurred boundaries. She even said that she quit using pills after realizing that by indulging in them, she was feeding an industry where dealers profited off addiction and exploitation. The honesty in her words was brutal and unsettling. She didn't soften the details to make them easier to hear. She spoke plainly, refusing to disguise what had happened to her. But what stood out was not the darkness itself. It was her resilience. Helen never framed herself as a victim. Instead, she spoke of survival, of learning hard lessons, and of emerging stronger. For many, her willingness to speak openly about such personal pain was an act of courage. Few actresses of her stature had ever admitted to something so raw, and Helen's choice to do so forced conversations about safety, consent, and the realities of women navigating male-dominated industries. Not everyone agreed with the way she described it, and her comments sparked debate. Some critics challenged her wording, while others defended her bravery for speaking at all. But whether people approved or not, one thing was undeniable. Helen Mirren wasn't afraid of controversy. She didn't reveal these experiences to earn sympathy or shock value. She revealed them because they were part of her truth. While Helen Mirren's past carried moments of struggle, her future would rewrite what it meant to age in Hollywood. By the time she reached her 60s, when most actresses were being pushed aside for younger faces, Helen was only growing more magnetic. Instead of fading quietly, she became a cultural icon who challenged every stereotype about beauty, age, and relevance. In 2003, she was immortalized at Madame Tussauds with her own wax figure, a sign that she had crossed from acclaimed actress to household name. A few years later, she was chosen by artist Sir Peter Blake to appear in his Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band tribute artwork, joining a select group of Britain's most admired cultural figures. But what really stunned the world was the way she redefined what it meant to be a sex symbol. In 2006, at the age of 61, Helen played Queen Elizabeth II in The Queen, a performance that earned her an Academy Award. Yet only 2 years later, she posed for Esquire magazine, wearing nothing but a black jacket and heels. The shoot was bold, playful, and unforgettable, sparking a frenzy of headlines. For decades, Hollywood had told women that turning 40 meant losing their allure. Helen smashed that belief with a single photo shoot. In 2011, Esquire went even further, naming her the sexiest woman alive, a title usually reserved for actresses half her age. Just when the world thought it had seen every side of Helen Mirren, she revealed something even more unexpected, her love of naturism. While other celebrities carefully guarded their personal quirks, Helen spoke openly about the fact that she enjoyed spending time at nude beaches and even described herself as a naturist at heart. To some, this sounded outrageous, especially coming from a woman who was not only an Oscar-winning actress, but also a dame of the British Empire. But for Helen, it wasn't a scandal, it was liberation. She explained that being naked in nature stripped away all the illusions of society. Age, beauty, status, none of it mattered when everyone was equal in their most natural state. She once said that she felt happiest walking around a nude beach, surrounded by people of all ages and all body types, because there was nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Her comments immediately made headlines. In 2004, she was even named Naturist of the Year, an unusual honor for someone who had also been voted sexiest woman alive. But that was the paradox of Helen Mirren. She could be regal and refined in one moment, playful and unfiltered in the next. Rather than shy away from the label, she embraced it, explaining that nudity didn't make her feel vulnerable. Instead, it made her feel powerful, comfortable, and free. Fans admired her honesty, even if some were shocked by it, because it was yet another reminder that Helen lived her life entirely on her own terms. For many actors, the later years of their careers mean smaller roles, fading relevance, and the quiet retreat from stardom. But Helen Mirren never followed that script. Instead, she entered her 70s with the same fire that had defined her youth, proving she could still dominate screens both big and small. In 2022, she took on a role that introduced her to an entirely new generation of fans, the Paramount Plus series, 1923, a prequel to the hit show Yellowstone. Starring alongside Harrison Ford, Helen played Cara Dutton, the matriarch of a ranching dynasty caught in the chaos of the American West. Her performance was commanding, layered with strength, vulnerability, and a quiet authority that left viewers in awe. Critics praised her ability to bring gravitas to television at a time when most stars her age would have stepped back. And fans were captivated by the chemistry between her and Ford, two legends sharing the screen with effortless power. Just a year later, Helen shocked audiences again with a transformation almost unrecognizable. In Golda 2023, she portrayed Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, wearing heavy prosthetics that altered her appearance entirely. The casting sparked debate. Some argued about whether she should have played the role at all, while others applauded the choice. Helen, as always, faced the controversy head-on, explaining that her job as an actor was to inhabit characters, not shy away from them. The film demanded a level of discipline and grit that only someone of her experience could deliver, and whether people agreed with the casting or not, her performance was undeniably commanding. Just when people thought Helen Mirren's career had reached its natural peak, she proved that even red carpets could become her stage for reinvention. In recent years, she has delighted fans with bold, playful appearances that broke every expectation of how a dame of the British Empire was supposed to behave. At the Cannes Film Festival, she stunned photographers by walking out with striking dyed hair, first a silvery blue, then a vivid pink. These weren't subtle changes, they were daring statements, the kind that made headlines worldwide. Here was an actress in her 70s, refusing to fade quietly into classic elegance, and instead reminding everyone that age could be vibrant, rebellious, and fun. The images went viral across social media, with younger audiences cheering her boldness and older fans admiring her refusal to play it safe. At the same time, Helen became a face for L'Oreal, one of the world's biggest beauty brands. For many, this was shocking, not because she didn't deserve it, but because beauty campaigns had always focused on youth. Yet here was Helen, embracing wrinkles and all, proving that style and confidence mattered more than a number. She didn't present herself as still beautiful despite her age. She presented herself as beautiful because of her age, because of the life and personality behind every expression. In a culture obsessed with youth, that honesty resonated deeply. These moments weren't accidents. They showed Helen's gift for staying relevant without chasing trends. She wasn't trying to be hip for the sake of headlines. Instead, she leaned into her personality, playful, fearless, and always willing to surprise. What made it even more remarkable was that Helen didn't seem to care about being viral. She was simply having fun, expressing herself, and living life without apology. The fact that millions of people found inspiration in that only reinforced her unique power. At an age when most stars worry about being forgotten, Helen Mirren became trendier than ever, not by chasing relevance, but by being unapologetically herself. Looking back across Helen Mirren's extraordinary life, one theme stands out above all others. She never lived by anyone else's rules. She was born between nobility and poverty, with Russian aristocracy on one side and East End grit on the other. From the beginning, she carried contradictions that could have broken her identity, but instead, she turned them into strength. She grew up alongside glamour through her cousin, a Bond girl, yet chose to define herself as an anti-monarchist, refusing to bow to tradition. She became unstoppable on the stage, commanding attention in roles that demanded intensity and risk, forcing audiences to question what women in theater could be. She loved deeply, shaping Liam Neeson's career before letting him go, and then marrying Taylor Hackford on her own terms. She broke taboos by openly saying she never wanted children, long before it was widely accepted for women to choose differently. She shocked people with her honesty about religion, about her pain, and about her liberation, never hiding behind the polished mask expected of movie stars. And yet, for all the revelations, she never lost her allure. She was crowned a sex symbol at 60, proving beauty has no expiration date. She embraced naturism without shame, turning nudity into a statement of freedom. She reinvented herself on screen with 1923 and Golda, tackling roles with the same intensity she had in her youth, even when controversy followed. And in recent years, she became viral again, striding down red carpets with blue and pink hair, starring in beauty campaigns that rewrote the rules of aging, and reminding the world that confidence, humor, and boldness matter more than time. So what is Helen Mirren's greatest secret? The truth is, she never really kept secrets at all. She lived her life with honesty, choosing when and how to reveal her story on her terms. Every contradiction, every confession, every reinvention was part of a bigger truth, that freedom comes from refusing to conform. That is Helen Mirren's legacy. If you've enjoyed uncovering the real story of Helen Mirren, the rebel, the icon, the woman who redefined what it means to be timeless, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned, because Hollywood is filled with hidden stories, and we're just getting started.